Well, hi, good day and welcome to our Thursday noontime webinar. As you can see on screen, we've got two of the three musketeers, GT Ferreira and Laurie Dippenaar. We've got a very, very special webinar for you today. GT and Laurie, we've got a couple of your friends who are going to make a little contribution as well. So it'll be quite, they promise they won't say anything embarrassing. So it should be a lot of fun. But thanks again for being with us for the next hour. Just to get the tech right, I want to be sure everybody can hear us well. You'll see on your screen there is a little hand item. If you can hear clearly, or if it's all coming through okay, please raise your hand. I see there's a lot of people. There we go. Okay. There you go. The hands. Thank you very much. So the hands are fine. Just to remind you that we do like to make this interactive. So if you go down on that little tab that's on your screen, there's a question mark there, which is for asking questions. So if you click on that, type through your question, you'll be able to join us, and we'll pick up your questions as we go through. Paul Harris will be joining us in just a moment. We have, as always, we got some technical issues, but maybe if we can kick it off, and I'm sure we'll get Paul's views in just a moment. GT, from your perspective, you're the older of the three, or the eldest of the three, I believe.
Yeah, but just by a little bit.
Were you the guy who set the strategy? Maybe the two of you can just explain a little bit of how you divided the roles from the day that you decided to go into business together.
Maybe I can just start. Say, the one obvious thing, that being a chartered accountant was always mine, but strategy was a collective thing always, because it's so important, and you obviously need as many viewpoints on strategy you can. The one thing that GT kept to himself, and it's right so, because he was the best negotiator by far, is all the big deals were almost single-handedly negotiated by him. GT, I don't know what you wanted. What would you like to add?
I don't think there's 100% correct, etc., but I'll rest it at that for the moment.
But
obviously, Alec, right from the beginning, I mean, the roles changed over time as the company grew, and we all contributed at different points and in different positions, obviously. As you know, I was the CEO originally. Laurie took over from me, and then Paul took over from Laurie at the R&B. So that the roles changed over time. But Laurie is basically right from the beginning. He was more of the financial guy, and that kept us on track. And but it was a collective effort all through the years.
I would just like to add, Alec, just on the negotiation side, quite early in our careers, as GT spotted that I can be quite expressive with my facial expression and body language, and he suggested me, you shouldn't even play poker over the telephone. So that kept me up.
So, but how did you find each other? How did you? Many people are friends at university or thereafter, but to stay friends in the way that you guys are, and business partners for so many decades. I'm sure there are many people listening and saying,
"The situation actually started. I, after left Bank of Johannesburg, we started a company called Magnum Leasing, and then I, at one stage, decided that I needed to start a new company or find new partners, and I knew Goss very well from university. I then approached Pat Goss, and Pat actually at that time worked with Laurie and introduced Laurie to me. And that's how the three of us got together. So Pat and myself was vastly together, although, and Laurie not. But after that, it was a threesome. And then Pat's father passed away 3 months after we started our company. And subsequent to that, he had to go and help his mother run the businesses, the Goss businesses. And Paul joined us. So that's how the connection came. And Paul was also at university with Pat and myself. So we knew each other from there. And again, he worked at the IDC with Laurie. So that's how the core got together.
But how did you stay together?
Alec, I think it was honestly based, firstly, on mutual respect. Secondly, we definitely had the same value system, which is critically important. Thirdly, our wives got along very well too. That helped. Loved the same things, all love sport. We attended Olympic Games together with our families and that type of thing. And it doesn't mean we never had differences of opinion, but the debates were always extremely civil. And the case of the best argument won.
I'm hoping
I
that.
can just add, we always use the expression, the business case prevails, and so on. Your personal preferences should not interfere.
But there must have been times that you struggled to overcome that barrier. Again, what we're trying to do today is to give everybody who's tuning into this some real good practical help on a post-COVID world for them, on how they build their businesses by learning from some of South Africa's very, very best. So it's
Alec, maybe I can help there. What GT said earlier, in the debates about strategy, business, and that type of thing, we had this saying, in this case prevails. That meant you could not introduce bias, prejudice, etc., into the debate. Now, I'll give you an example. When we acquired Momentum, its head office was in Centurion, and our head office was in Sandton, and everybody immediately assumed that we would move the head office from Centurion to Sandton on the basis of that's most convenient to the bosses, okay, which is not a sound business principle. And in that case, we just said, no, this decision will be taken on the basis of the business case prevails. And once we'd done all the analysis and found that wages were more higher in Sandton, we'd lose a lot of skills. Issues pointed in one direction only, and that was to keep the head office in Centurion. But we didn't allow, as I say, emotional aspects to enter into the debate, or preferences, like a shorter commute for the bosses, etc.
Okay, so the friendship, I understand how you got together, but how did you stay together as friends?
With difficulty. No, I'm only joking. I obviously we had differences of opinion and maybe sometimes some arguments, but it's never been
yeah,
personal.
But right
and
on the whole bloody thing, okay? You know,
there comes, now remember, this is the techie of the group that can't even get onto this.
Sounds to me like the techie has now arrived. Paul, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
We
Okay,
can't see you.
Okay, you're not missing anything.
But that's fun. So the question really was, how did you guys stay together? It'd be nice for the three of you to each give us your thoughts on that. GT had started.
Okay, we have perhaps some different personalities and some different strengths and different weaknesses. And I think we there's when we got involved with Momentum, there were 2 psychologists in the group, and we didn't think a lot about human relations. I mean, not human relations, human resources. So we wanted to fire both of them, and Francois Higu eventually became one of the best people in the group to get the team to work together. And Francois' statement was always, we all have allowable weaknesses. And if we allow for those weaknesses in our partners and our group, we can play to the strengths of the various people. And I think in that sense, that's probably why we stayed together. We knew each other well. We knew what our strengths and weaknesses were. And we allowed the right person to do whatever he felt, and we trusted them. So there's a lot of trust involved, obviously.
Laurie?
Alec, I just want to keep it short and sweet. I attach, and we all do, a great deal to a value system, and we definitely do have and had the same value system. It's a bit like a marriage. If you and your wife do not have the same value system, it's doomed to fail. And I think that was also one of the core foundations of the friendship, and also that we respected each other's, and the debates were always very civil. So we didn't create much opportunity to get extremely cross with each other or throw our toys out of the cot.
Paul?
Yeah, I think if you had to use the analogy, and I agree with a lot of the stuff GT and Laurie have said, but if you had to use the analogy of a rugby team, if you always concerned about what the guy next to you, if you're a center, for example, and you need to defend, you must mark your man, and then the other guy must mark his man. And that is, I think, how we operated. You know, we each had our strengths and weaknesses, and we stuck to that. So, you know, using the rugby analogy again, if the first center broke and I was marking him, and I'd have to tackle him, and I wouldn't have to worry about, I wouldn't expect the other guys to be worrying about him because it is elsewhere. So I think we worked as a team, and I think we recognized each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Well, the big move, I suppose you could say, and you gave us a little background, GT, was when you merged with Rand Merchant Bank. And at that time, Johann Rupert started coming into your lives. Has he played a significant role subsequent to that in business and personally?
He certainly has. I mean, when we got involved with Rand Merchant Bank, Johann was asked by his father to join at the Rembrandt Group in Stellenbosch. He was looking for management to take over the bank. Johann gave us a very, very clean bank, which was very valuable. He gave us some good lessons, such as don't ever lend to somebody that doesn't want to repay you, because even if he can repay you or won't. So lend to somebody that wants to repay you, and even if he can't, he'll try his utmost best. So that's maybe lesson 101 in banking. And he remained as chairman of the bank for quite a while. And then obviously we sort of, our paths diverted at that point in time. But at a much, much later stage, when Anglo-American, that was after we started FirstRand, when Anglo-American wanted to sell their financial assets, the Remgro Group came back again into our lives, and they switched out of resources into financial services. So we've got a very long relationship with Johann and obviously with the Remgro Group, and that's been very good to us.
Well, I'm
I'd
pleased.
just like to, Alec, the transaction that GT mentioned was crucial for us when Anglo American decided they want to concentrate on resources. We needed to find a buyer for a very big stake. And at that stage, Johann swapped or sold out of their resources and invested in us. And I think it must have been GT, maybe for the first 5 years, it looked like a terrible decision, you know, because it was sort of at the time that the commodity super cycle was on the go. And we tracked the share prices of the two entities, and it looked like a decision. And of course, then the super cycle of commodities ended, and then it looked like became a brilliant. He showed a lot of faith in us by buying that stake from Anglo.
Johann Rupert joins us now. Johann, why did you put so much faith in chaps?
Well, that's Paul giggling. I can't see Paul's face. Isn't the rain working, Paul, where you are?
No, I'm having problems with my fiber line.
No, it's really interesting listening to these three gentlemen. By the way, Alec, I've lost 15 kilos. You can lose that picture, please.
The only one we've got with copyright, so I'll need to get
In any case, now it's fascinating listening to my three friends. When I realized, and interesting, my dad was 68 at the time, that he was having problems controlling some of these subsidiaries, it became a no-brainer. And I didn't want to hand my colleagues, 5-year-long colleagues at Rand Merchant Bank, over to people that I didn't know. There were other people involved, and Paul had in fact done me a big favor. We'd been friends since '69, and I knew GT and Pat Goss. Pat and I also played cricket together at the same time as Paul, and I trusted them, and did me the immense favor by asking GT to explain and confirm my doubts about a certain individual, and 5 companies went bankrupt in '82, December '82. And luckily we'd been covered. So it was more of an issue of who do you trust. But it's fascinating because I had, and my wife Gaynor knew Laurie from university days. So it was a natural fit of friends. But it's fascinating listening to the three describing their roles. I think it's best summarized by saying that Paul always wanted to sail with a spinnaker, flat out, running the options business in South Africa. And when we did the deal, RMB really consisted out of some brilliant individuals, the three of whom you've got on screen, but there were people like Dr. Alberto Botiga, who ran the options business. But initially, it was the Umgeni Waterboard leverage lease that produced all the cash flow from their side. I soon found out that, having known Paul for very many years, Paul was the adventurer looking at new things. I would describe Laurie as the conservative individual that was like a sheet anchor, making sure that the yacht wouldn't run onto the rocks. And the skipper was GT, who had to be the amongst all of these individuals in the bank. And I don't think that role has changed over the years.
Johann Rupert joining us there and giving us his insights. And thanks, Johann, for sharing that with us. We've got so many questions, but before we go there, Paul, I think as the optimist of the group, or certainly one of the optimists of South Africa, and before we let Johann go, although he will still be in the webinar, I'm sure the big question for many people, and starting with you, Paul, is where does South Africa go after COVID-19? Are you still optimistic? Are you still seeing an exciting future? And there are many questions along this on this topic that have come through from various people who are listening.
Yeah, maybe I could start by quoting Johann. Johann has said that right at the beginning. He says this is not, the COVID is not a pause button, it's a reset button that we have to press. And I think there's a lot in that. I mean, things are going to be totally different, but you know, it is difficult sometimes to get to be positive. Things are very difficult, as we all know. But I just think if you go back and see what we've been through as a country, I mean, you can even go back, if I go back to my father went to the war. We then had Sharpeville, we had the Soweto riots. After that, we had a debt standstill. I mean, can you imagine a debt standstill? The government coming and saying that you're not allowed to repay foreign debt. Imagine how bad that would be right now from an economic point of view. And then we had the transition. We had people driving through the doors at the World Trade Center and so on. So just about a civil war. So we've been through big problems before. And if our particular group, we started in huge problems. We were right at the sort of final stages of apartheid. We went through the transition. You know, there was talk of capturing the heights of the economy and all that type of thing. So we're in a difficult and dark place at the moment, but I think that we've got resilience and we'll come out of it. And I think that's the attitude we need to have. If our attitude is that all things are going to fall over, and then I think we've got problems. So there may be a bit of irrationality in the positiveness, but we've almost got no option but to see positiveness and to see this as an opportunity to build. Because the one thing's for certain, we'll be building off a low base.
Laurie?
I think one of the pluses that has come out of this COVID era is that business and that have moved closer together. It's not perfect yet, but they've certainly built bridges, and hopefully we've earned the respect of the government. I think to get out of this hole that we're in, and in fact the whole world, we have to get some of the basics right. And one of my big issues has always been this question that we need in the appointment of people to be a meritocracy. Okay. Now, if you think it does work, a meritocracy, and if you think we've got a constitutional court in this country that is a center of excellence, okay, it's admired by everybody. We've got a reserve bank that is very, very good. We had a receiver of revenue that ranked in the top 5 in the world, very good, until somebody tried to damage it. And then we've got a very good treasury. So what I'm saying, it is possible to have transformation at a point on merit and appoint the right technocrats. We're in trouble if we continue to appoint on the basis of loyalty to a party and all other factors. Think of a soccer team. Imagine you assemble a soccer team, not on the basis of people being able to play soccer, but all sorts of other criteria like closeness to the coach and that type of thing. So to sum up, hopefully this will make us get the basics right in this country, some of the stuff that we have neglected in the past. And we definitely will need to do that to sort of dig ourselves out of the hole that we're in at present.
GT, how do you see the post-COVID future for South Africa?
Alec, I I haven't got a magic wand that I think we can wave. I think what we just need to understand, and we all in the same boat. The whole world is actually in the same boat. It's not only South Africa. And when you talk about South Africa, we must also realize that we are all, every company, that every individual and all the companies are playing under the same handicap. And going forward, it's a relative game again. In other words, you have to play better than your opposition. Doesn't really matter what the handicap is. The handicap is now greater than it was before. But I also just want to go back to what Paul mentioned. We merged with Rand Merchant Bank in 1985, and we were very happy. We thought we had foreign lines, etc., and access to capital. And then that was in June 85, and in, I think it was August, September, P.W. Botha pointed his finger at the world. Now, he may as well have pointed the middle finger, and everything came to a standstill. But if you think what happened there, Paul referred to the standstill. We had the commercial rand and the financial rand. Everything was, it was a disaster far bigger than what South Africa has got today. And I would argue that it was the private sector's resilience that got us through that. And if you look backwards and you actually look at share prices, etc., and even at Rand Merchant Bank's performance, I'm now talking about, call it the profits, etc., there wasn't a dip. We went through that. And if we did it then, I think we can do it again.
Johann, you were quoted in the beginning by Paul. I'm going to impose on you, if I may, just for one last thought on this subject of South Africa's post-COVID future.
Alec, you didn't really give me advance warning of this. But a final word, really. I asked my father years ago, amongst many wisdoms that he parted on earth, was, tell me, would you have done the same thing again? Gone international, do this. He said, no, of course not. I asked him why. He said, I would have known that it was impossible. So I guess when I look back at when we started and the things we did, if we'd known then what we know now, we would never have taken the risks and we would never have ventured forth. We wouldn't have done, and when I say we, I say Rand Merchant Bank, the whole group that they've done. At that stage, in your 30s, you don't know that it's impossible. The fact is, thank God you didn't know that it was impossible. So to everyone there in their 30s, don't think things are impossible. If you apply your minds and you work very, very hard, and you remain, you know where due north is, your ethics and your culture. And I think the one thing that stood out to me with GT, Laurie, and Paul was the culture and the ethics. And if you get the culture and the ethics right in the beginning, it stands you in good stead. Because to change the culture of a bad company is damn near impossible. Post-COVID, the world will have to realize that there's a reset. Hopefully, Alec, the time out, certainly it's given me, I spent 2.5 months with my family in the Karoo, my 89-year-old mother-in-law, who's fitter than any of us, Gaynor, 3 kids, better halves, grandson. And I don't think I'll ever have another time like that together or family bonding. And I think a lot of people will realize that we'll have to change our lifestyles. We need empathy with not only one another, but empathy with the environment. We certainly have to realize that global warming is an existential threat. And we will have more viruses. The way we live, it was predicted that we'll have global viruses. Now, in terms of business, the world economy was already in difficulty. Europe cannot create jobs with 0% interest rates. This was pre-COVID. Secondly, the United States, despite President Trump's claims, those were gig jobs, insecure for the workers. And secondly, it was the stock market. Now, when you get interest rates to zero, people look for alternate investment. The whole boom in the stock market, fueled by massive infusion of central bank money, the new NMT series.
Johann, I'm sorry, man.
Overriding, and this is the only message. This is what's for the fourth industrial revolution is upon us. So people must think laterally and think about the change in the economy. And with that, I'm going to be watching Test cricket now.
Johann Rupert, I suppose in a way, guys, he's part of the story. He's been part of your success over the years. But we've got so many questions, which I'd like to throw the first one to you, and it stems a little from the earlier question about what a 30-year-old should be looking forward to. Paul, it was aimed at you, but I'm sure all three of you'd like to pick up on this. What do you advise a 20-year-old South African today?
I don't know if I should tell the story that I often tell. It's you can live in a zoo, or you can live in a open reserve, okay, in the wilderness. The zoo, a lot of upside. You get fed at the right time. They control the temperature. If you break a leg and you happen to be, if you kudu, for example, and you break a leg, they'll put it in plaster and it'll survive. And you'll never have anything to worry about. They probably every now and then may bring a mate as well that you can sort of get on with her too. So right, so it's pretty easy in a zoo. But now in the wilderness, you have to be sharp. You have to be. There's danger. But you also see the sunrise, you hear the dawn chorus, you get different weather patterns, and you have to be sharp and you have to be on it. And from my perspective, South Africa is an incredibly exciting place. It's the wilderness. There's some danger involved, but there's also fantastic upsides. And when things go right, you have your emotions are you're happy and so on, but you're also going to have some downtimes. I like the excitement in South Africa, the fact that we're right at the beginning, that we're doing something different, and so on. So if I was a 30-year-old, I'd hang in and enjoy it.
There are other parallels there as well. In certain corporates, they like zoos where people get fed and they just come to work to get fed. And the other corporates, they're more like a wilderness where entrepreneurship is encouraged. You guys managed to encourage entrepreneurship. Again, Nefra Young, one of many who's asked this question, how did you instill that culture of entrepreneurship, of innovation?
Well, I think because we were all, I suppose, entrepreneurs in our own right, I've often quoted that I read a dissertation by a student for a master's degree at the University of Orange Free State then, that had made a comparison between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And when they looked at all the characteristics and the qualities of the two, and obviously hard work, etc., and all of those things matter, there were only two things that differed between an entrepreneur and what he called an intrapreneur. Now, the intrapreneur, as far as he was concerned, was the person that's got all the entrepreneurial qualities, but doesn't have two, and those two were ego, or a very high ego, and then the propensity to take risk. Those were the ones that were lacking. But we, through all the years, have actually sought out those people, call them the intrapreneurs, that were as intelligent, as good as the entrepreneur, but you didn't necessarily want that person with a high propensity to take risk in your organization, dealing on the money market or the capital market, etc. And also not to have too big an ego. Now, ego is a very good thing because it pushes us to do better. And we have had a couple of people with very, very high egos. But I think that's what we sought in the organization, and we encourage them to be like that in the group. I think Laurie and them had lots of discussions and talks to the people. You can go back there on the culture, Laurie.
I think I'd like to start actually when the three of us, when we acquired Rand Merchant Bank, and we then needed a payoff line, and we got a marketing friend of us to come and, Ernie Jabay, to come and come up with something, and he came up with the payoff line of traditional values, innovative ideas. And I said to him, how did you get to that? And he said, well, I've spent a week with you chaps. I observed that's the DNA of that little bank at the start, at this point in time. So in a way, it's a good start. If you've sort of, when you were still small, you've got innovation as part of your DNA. Then I think we've always made a big fuss and respected and admired small companies that are innovative in the group. It didn't matter if they only contributed 0.1% of the group's profit. If they were innovative and did something different and disruptive, they were honored and revered. And I think that's very important. It wasn't, we weren't dismissive. Oh, it's just a small little operation. And then the third one, which we really can thank Michael Jordaan for, was that he introduced formal programs and prizes for people who came up with innovative ideas within the bank, how to improve queues, dozens of things. And it privileged to attend the prize giving. And some of the prizes were quite large, I think in the millions, for coming up with innovative. And you suddenly realize that if people are given freedom and encouraged, anybody can be innovative. So those programs, which I hope still continue, made a huge contribution. So innovation became part of the fabric of the organization.
Stuart Pennington had an interesting point, a comment that he's put here. He says, Paul is a good golfer, Laurie an average golfer, and GT isn't a golfer. Well, some of the other differences, and you mentioned Michael Jordaan. I had a chat with him this morning, Laurie, and this is what he had to say about you guys.
Alec, thank you for giving me an opportunity to use this forum to say something about the three individuals that you're talking to today. They have made an immense difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of people in South Africa. So if I could say something about them first individually, and turning to GT, He's seen as the strategist supreme who plotted the course of first RCI, then RMB, then FirstRand. He's an excellent deal maker. The biggest one must be acquiring FNB and Southern. And while he will joke that his counterparty was the most difficult person to do a deal with ever, GT eventually overcame those objections. And then GT is a storyteller, but they're not just ordinary stories, but they always impart wisdom. For Laurie, one immediately knows that he is a clear and logical thinker. In many business situations, he would reduce complexity, often by asking the simple questions that everyone else was too afraid to ask, lest it show them up. And I can relate that in many stressful situations, calm would appear in the room simply when Laurie entered, because one knew that when Laurie was there, the decisions would be predictable and they would be sound. And then finally, Paul, I think in his nature, is a trader who always sees opportunities and not the downsides. He's a great startup enthusiast, and of course that has been infectious on the people around him. And the way he approaches innovation is that there's always a cleverer way of doing things. And of course, I'm very proud to be his junior partner in our venture called Rain. And then a message collectively to these three incredible gentlemen is the legacy that they have already left behind. And in that legacy, I'm not just talking about FirstRand as an institution, but maybe far more importantly, the philosophy around FirstRand, the empowering culture which they created so that people can actually surpass their own expectations of themselves, leaving behind a meritocracy where it was the best idea that always win. And through empowering, setting up other people to succeed. I can truly say that anyone who has done well in FirstRand has only done so by standing on the shoulder of these three giants.
Isn't that a lovely little comment there? The wise, the enthusiastic, and the calm. I guess if you were to critique what Michael had to say, I'm sure that he would. You wouldn't really be able to find much wrong in it, but you know each other better. Has he got it wrong somewhere?
Sounds fair enough to me.
I'm very happy to accept what you said there as true. I'm not 100% sure about it, but yeah, I'll go with it.
But it's great that someone like Michael has worked with you, succeeded with you, and still a young man, and gone on to do other big things. One of the innovations that you introduced that maybe is not that well known was the class of. Where did that come from, and what is it exactly? Paul?
Yeah, I think it was way back in '93. We had a problem that we were very successful in the dealing room, and we had difficulty in employing people that were really good. And the problem was that if somebody had sort of 10 minutes experience in the industry, or they'd been a good motorcar salesman or something like that, we just rope them in and they'd sit on the dealing desk, and before you look again, they'd made a lot of money, and they were good at what they did. But then we said, well, what about the pipeline? What about people in the future? Shouldn't we really start building up a group of younger people that can network amongst themselves, that got diversity of skills and that came from very diverse backgrounds? And let's start creating opportunities for them. And so what we did is we put out an ad, and the ad, I'll never forget it. It was RMB does not employ CAs. And anyway, every single, just about the first 50 replies we got was from CAs to say, why don't you employ us, and so on. And we said, no, we want people that think differently. And as a result, we had engineers, doctors, lawyers, and we had a lot of CAs as well applying. And we ended up choosing, and the criteria we used was that they had to be the best, they had to be leaders, they had to have academic backgrounds, all that type of thing. And I mean, I must say, we always joked that we would never have jumped through all those hoops ourselves. We would never have been there, but we managed to employ some really, really good people. And we created a program where the senior people, and I as the CEO was very involved in it, that we spent a lot of time with these young guys, and who were brilliant and academically and in every way. And that was effectively the next level of people. Within sort of 5 years or so, they came through. In fact, one of the very first guys on the program was Michael Jordaan, who you've just spoken to. We've had several others that have got very top positions around the country, and also within the group. So that was origins, and I'm glad to see that it's still going.
It's not, Larry?
No, just it was Paul introduced it, and I honestly think that it was something that influenced the destiny of FirstRand, obtaining this talent when at a young age, and keeping and retaining them, and then over time they enter big leadership positions. It's really been a dramatic impact on the group.
It's interesting that it wasn't just the entrepreneurs, GT, to what you were saying earlier, but you also found people outside that you invested in, probably most famously Adrian Gore. Here's his message to you.
Alec, it's Adrian Gore. I want to make a few points about Laurie, GT, and Paul. For sure, they were at the heart of the success of Discovery. Laurie was our chairman and a mentor to me, and I work closely with Laurie, who I count as a very close friend, but also with GT and Paul. They are the most remarkable people. They are business leaders of a different caliber, in my view. Of course, they're excellent shareholders. They're long-term shareholders. It makes them unique. But more than that, they value truth. They value real societal impact, and they have incredible wisdom. And they pursue what is right for the business and for society. I found my interactions with them and my career with them incredibly inspiring. And I think Discovery and myself developed because of my interaction with them. I've had the pleasure of working with some of the best companies. That's been the Discovery model as we've globalized, the partnership model. But I had to say that I've never met people of this caliber, and I mean that. They are unique in their impact. So, you know, it's been an absolute pleasure working with them, and I hope to do more in some way. But I wanted to make those points.
That's Adrian Gore, the founder of Discovery. Just an interesting point on that. Discovery is in financial services. FirstRand is in financial services. So in a way, you were creating a competitor. Were you all in agreement to fund Discovery in the early days?
Maybe I can answer that, Alec, because I think I was the one that originally brought the proposal to the RMB. When we started, remember they started as a health insurer only, so they weren't in competition with us. However, after a few years, Adrian came to me and he said to me, it's not a good thing that we rely so heavily on health insurance. It's a highly regulated industry. We need more strings to our bow. And he then said he wanted to go into life insurance, but we already had momentum. And so I said, okay, just make a case for that. And he made a very, very persuasive case for the products that they were going to produce. And our thinking was then, we don't own 100%. We can't hold them back, even with us. It would be unfair to their minority shareholders. And also, it's fine if against each other. You must just see, hopefully, you can be one and two. And it's funny enough, a philosophy that we've now pursued, which you won't read in any business book or MBA course. We allow our companies to compete. We've got 3 or 4 companies doing life insurance, 2 doing health insurance, 3 doing short-term insurance. And it's a bit, well, it's good for them, because if you can't, if you suppress competition, you're saying you can't compete. And it's not dissimilar to what SA breweries did initially when they let their beer brands compete. And I must say, it's never caused us a problem at all, but it is an unusual business philosophy.
Heidi Pleike says, yes, Laurie, innovation is still strongly encouraged within the FirstRand Group. Stephen Harris, Paul, I'm not sure if it's any relation, but says that you have any plans to put together a book on how FirstRand came together and the lessons you learned along the way. I think it would have many lessons that people and business leaders could learn from.
Yeah, I don't know why I got that question, but look, a lot of people have spoken about that. I don't know. We've never really had a lot of enthusiasm for it. It's almost, I don't know. It's not a very, no, it's nothing we've really seriously, well, I certainly haven't seriously considered, but yeah.
Well, I think it's probably because they might have, there's Stephen Harris, it's a Harris, and he might have also read your lovely book on history, but we won't go there. I've been bugging you for a long time now to do an audio book on that, but we'll get there one day, I'm sure. Nkosi Gugushe asks, and this is a really good question, for the three panelists, South Africa has nearly 40 million poor and unemployed people. What are the three things we need done by whomever that can fundamentally shift our economy, our country, and people's lives permanently? I don't know if you'd like to start, because it's quite a philosophical question.
Maybe I'll get in first with one thing, and then the others, we're going to have to think about the other two. But I'd say the first one is we have to have a law and order. I really think that you have to have faith in the legal system. You have to, we have to address crime, straight law and order. And law and order will get rid of corruption and that type of thing. I mean, corruption is stealing from the poor. And the only way to do it is to have a proper legal system and and people to get behind it. So that would be the one. And the other two guys may have the other two.
Alec, one of the most obvious. Sorry, GT, you go.
I think we can only get there through growth in the economy. And I think government, instead of putting obstacles in the way of business, should encourage business. Obviously, government has got a very big role to play, but there's sometimes a way of stifling business, and I think there should be more encouragement for businesses to grow, to start, even if you actually take all the red tape away from even starting a little company, etc. If you look at other countries, and I mean, we can go straight to Singapore and then also to others, of how long does it take to start a company? How long does it take to jump through the hoops that sometimes there are? And but obviously for business also to be more involved with government, and that we work together in growing the economy. That's about the only way that I think we can maybe not totally eradicate poverty, but get rid of the inequality that there still are.
I'm going to state the obvious, Alec. I mean, to lift someone out of poverty, they need a job. And to get the job, you need to be employable. And to be employable, you need an education and or skills. Okay, it is that obvious. Now, I just want to touch on the skills side because we all know the importance of education. But just think of somebody that has got a driver's license. Okay, they double their chances of at least double their chances of being employed. So there are many skills that people can be taught, sort of non-academic skills, practical skills, welding, plumbing, whatever it is. But we're not very well geared to that. But the core of our problem is, and everybody points out that our inequality. Of course, we'll have the highest inequality in the world if you've got the highest unemployment in the world. It's per definition you will end up there. So it's about being employable, and for that, as I say, you need skills and or education.
Berenice Rose has posted this little comment, and I do apologize. We're not going to be able to get to, well, we will only be able to get to a fraction of all the questions, but this is for you, GT. She says, my father, Horace Glennie, from Let's Kraal days on Oom Alwyn's farm, reminded me before he passed about seeing you grow up, and he followed your path of success for many years. Well done, and thank you for the inspirational leadership. Isn't that lovely? And sometimes I guess the three of you would forget that people like Berenice Rose and her father, Horace Glennie, have been following your careers and not just with pride, but perhaps also repeating some of what you have done during that time. I've got two more questions in the time allotted. The one here is from Luke, and he wants to know promising industries to be in as a young professional. Paul, do you want to start there, being the tech?
Yeah, okay. As you may know, I went into telecommunications. We started RAIN, which is a data network. And I must say it's opened my eyes to a totally different industry. It's a massive industry. And I just think that things in the technical field is probably the strongest at the moment. You know, I think those sort of skills, fourth industrial revolution is a bit of a cliche there, but I think if you look at the trends of what's happening around the world, and I think COVID, if ever there's been an example of how technology can change things, I'm not necessarily saying for the better, but it's enabling so much more. The fact that we're talking even now, we're going to continue doing it. So things related to tech. So I would say one of the things I've always been strong on is people should learn keyboard skills. I wish I'd learned keyboard skills as a youngster and really get to know the tech, because it's not so much being in the tech business, but to use tech to enable your business. And I think a lot of businesses are going to be using tech to become better, and if they don't, they may go by the wayside in the new environment. So I'd be very, if I was a youngster, I'd make sure that I'm good at tech, and then you can use that to improve yourself and the company you work for.
Larry?
Alec, maybe
I'll
just
take a bit of an alternative.
there you go.
Okay. In other words, I say go into an industry which interests you, which you maybe got skills for, which you love. Okay, you can just maybe try and figure out if it's not a total dead end. But you know, you might be someone that loves gardening and you're quite artistic, and now you want to become a landscape gardener. Okay, it's not going to make what tech was, but you could go into tech and be miserably unhappy, or rather than that, you go into landscape gardening, design, and make it a decent living, but you fulfill. So I don't want to write off other industries, other than saying if something is clearly it's going to disappear, it's a complete dead end, then you try and avoid that. I mean, a case in point now, Alec, is your industry, which is battling a bit, which is journalism. A lot of them. So, but it doesn't mean, I don't think journalism is going to disappear in its entirety. It's just going to be there in a different shape. So why, I wouldn't still urge someone to go into something completely alien to them if they really have got writing skills and love journalism.
Alec, I think Larry sort of stole my thunder a bit there, but I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. Instead of saying you should go into these industries, I would say follow your dream, because if you land up in an industry that you do not really like, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to look at your watch and think about, what am I going to do after work? Whereas if you get into an industry which you enjoy, which you find interesting, etc., you will spend, you won't look at your watch at 5 o'clock. You'll probably only look at it at 7 o'clock and so on. And you will not make a very great success of any job unless you put in more than 8 hours a day. Because there are other people that's competing with you that are prepared or that is prepared to do that. So follow your dream and enjoy what you're doing. And that's what I say to 20-year-olds and even my own son, advice that I would give him, so that you enjoy what you're doing and try to become the best that you can in that particular job, whatever it may be.
Gents, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for another 5 minutes, because it is quite important that you apply the handing over of the baton. There's a comment from Zipozonke Buthelezi, who says, Laurie, Paul and GT, thank you for the inspiration. You guys have paved the way for us as young South Africans, and we promise you we will continue where you left off and ensure our country strives for excellence. Thank you guys for all the hard work, opportunities, and ensuring South Africa is a better country. And talking about handing over the baton, I also asked the new chairman of FirstRand, Roger Jardine, to give us some of his thoughts before we close off.
I would like to share some of my personal experiences on my journey with each of you. GT, I will never forget the day that you called me over after a board meeting and said, young man, you are terribly underutilized on this board. And then you proceeded to assign me to various board committees. This brief discussion after a board meeting undoubtedly set me on the path to becoming the chairman of FirstRand one day. Paul, we often sat next to each other at board meetings, and I enjoyed our shared comments and opinions on a range of topics, both on FirstRand and on the country. I am deeply influenced by your corporate courage, and it shapes my approach to my role today. And Laurie, I'm forever thankful for your mentorship and guidance through my transition to the chair, and your absolute confidence that I was up to the task. I watched you carefully in your role as chairman, and your authentic leadership, your care for staff and customers, which came naturally, and your commitment to always doing the right thing, has shaped my approach to my role today. Thank you to all of you as the founders of FirstRand, and for substantively changing the corporate landscape of South Africa. The current generation of FirstRand leaders and the next generation to come will forever be grateful for your leadership and vision. Thank you.
So that's from the old chairmans to the new chairman. Did you all have a go at being chair of FirstRand?
No, I wasn't.
We ran out of time for Paul.
But you were chairman of RMB. You were.
But what about the future? What message do you have for those to whom, those like Roger Jardine, those like Zipozonke, and many others we haven't been able to feature in this webinar today, for the way ahead for FirstRand and for South Africa?
Alec, just maybe something, maybe not directly what you asked, etc., but some advice as well. When you appoint people, or people have often asked me and said, now tell me, how do you judge, or how do you find a good manager, and how do you actually, and I've always said, you look at the people that person surrounds him or her with. If they're good, he or she is good. People are often too afraid to appoint the best people. You need to actually appoint a person that can take over your job. maybe not immediately, but later, even immediately, because that will also spur you to deliver a better performance. So it's try to actually spend more time when you appoint people than I must say, I also fall into that trap sometimes. You're a bit lazy to interview or select the right people, but that's a very, very important thing to do. And I think we've been lucky, we've been fortunate, but we've also concentrated on that. And I would like to believe that the management that we leave behind are, as Paul earlier said, actually better than we were. We would probably not have jumped through the hoops that they had.
Paul?
Yeah, I must say that something that we've often said is that we should create a culture that where people sit around a round table. And I really think we achieved that, which is, you know, there's no one person that dominates. The only thing that dominates is rational argument. So think about it as a round table. And I think if you do that, and one of the things I always said, and Laurie and GT always said, is that we want to get to a situation where we can tiptoe away without anybody noticing. And I think I am sort of comfortable in my own mind that I managed to achieve that. I'm proud of that. And because we left some fantastic people, and we've tiptoed away, and nobody's noticed, which is fantastic.
I don't think nobody's noticed quite.
Well, in the company, nobody's. Yeah.
In the company. Mm-hmm. Larry, was it hard to tiptoe away?
No, yes and no. I think it's been coming a long time. I think it's quite important to realize that the sort of handover took almost 10 years. You know, I stepped down as CEO of FirstRand in 2005. Okay, so and I only finally left the company two years ago. So it's been a very, very evolutionary transition to this stage. The one thing I suppose I really miss is, as a banker, you're at the epicenter of what's going on and you're very well informed. And so when I recently walked into FirstRand, I was overcome by a feeling of nostalgia, this thing of being at the epicenter and knowing what's going on. And then I thought of those massively things I have to wade through, and then the nostalgia disappeared quite quickly. But it has been evolutionary and over a long time. So it's been easy, or relatively easy, to deal with.
Kim Holmes says, thank you for a fabulous webinar. I'm a FirstRander and you guys rock. And Chifisi Rolushai says, many thanks to Paul and Laurie. Insightful and inspirational leadership. We're going to close off with your dream for South Africa. Again, this is something that has been asked by numerous people, Dina Chetty, some others as well. Would you like to just, in a minute or so, give us your dream for South Africa as we close this very insightful and thoughtful webinar? GT?
My dream is that we can become a real non-racial society, that we come back to the point that Laurie originally mentioned, a meritocracy. There are obviously a lot of things that can be done better, and that we should assist certain members of the population that have lagged behind for a variety of reasons. And but I think I have seen it in the past that South Africans can compete anywhere in the world. We maybe sometimes you go to the States and you hear these confident Americans espousing what they're doing and using terminology that you don't understand. And then after a week you say, but we just use different words for what you guys are saying. And I think we can, as a nation, compete with the best in the world. And I'd like to see us get to that place as soon as we can.
Larry?
I would,
right. Paul?
yeah, I would say everything GT said. And I really believe that. And I think the other thing is to unlock the unbelievable latent potential that there is in this country and in the people of this country. You know, everybody, I always say that people in South Africa, people have got a positive attitude. They want to achieve something. There's nobody that doesn't want to improve themselves. And I just think that we have to find ways to unlock the potential of people. And if we do that, I think we'll create a country, as GT said, that we would really like to live in, and where we'd want our grandchildren and other people's children and so on and families to live in.
My dream is that we have a country where we all have confidence in it, all demographic groups, that we have a future in this country, and not at the expense of each other, but together. And that means things like feeling safe, having access to good education, having access to good healthcare. The sort of formula for a winning country is not, it's easy to write down, difficult to achieve, but easy to write down. And that we don't have this constant nagging feeling amongst many segments of the community that should I stay, right? You don't want that. I think it must, if you're thinking of leaving, it's just purely on career considerations and not because you feel threatened. Thanks, Alec.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, GT, for a wonderful hour and a bit. Thanks for indulging me for a little longer than usual. It has been a pleasure, and we have recorded this, and we will definitely be putting the webinar up on YouTube. In fact, our general manager, Stuart Lohman, has all of those details. Stu, do you want to just tell us where the webinar will be available?
Excellent, thanks, Alec, and thanks to Laurie, GT, and Paul. Just on the chat group, Alec, I put the link there to the YouTube channel, so anyone on this webinar can just click that. It'll take them to the BizNews YouTube channel. And as you mentioned, we'll hopefully get this webinar up in the next hour or two. But thanks again, everyone.
All right. So, and the chat is then at the bottom of your of the little Go-To webinar logo. Thanks again for being with us. Just to let you know that next week we're going to be talking to another three musketeers. Ian and Bernard Cantor and Stephen Kossoff, the founders of Investec. So it'll be, I hope, half as interesting as we've had today. Thanks very much, gents. And
thank you, Alec.
And for indulging us for going a little over time. We don't usually do this, and I think next time round we'll send someone to Paul's house to help him with the technology so we can see him too.
Well, you haven't missed anything.
Thanks very much. Here we are.